On today's show, I'm bringing on one of the best Chargers beat writers in the business. The Athletic's Daniel Popper joins me to talk about the Chargers' first padded practice, and that means Joe Alt one-on-ones.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, David Droegemeier, and I've been covering the Chargers for 9 seasons, but this is my 7th as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you so much for the everydayers out there for making us your first listen, and to make sure you never miss big guest interviews like Daniel Popper of The Athletic, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcasts from. Well, on today's show, we're talking to the Athletic's Daniel Popper. Of course, Daniel Popper covers the Chargers. He's one of the best beat writers in the business, gives great in-depth practice reports of every single day of Chargers training camp. Make sure and you go subscribe to The Athletic. Daniel Popper is totally worth it. We're going to talk to him about Joe Alt, the one-on-one situation, how Trey Pipkins is making his transition, Quentin Johnston, and what are the differences between Jim Harbaugh and Brandon Staley and his training camp. We're going to get into all of that. But before we do, I got to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, without further ado, here he is, the incomparable Daniel Popper. All right, guys, very special guest is here. Of course, I am referring to Daniel Popper. He is a senior writer for The Athletic, covering the Chargers. He has the best written content in the game. I mean, every single practice he is covering in full detail. Make sure you go subscribe to The Athletic so you can get those detailed breakdowns of every single Chargers training camp practice, including today's padded practice on Monday as we're recording this. So glad to have you on the show here today, Popper. And of course, today was the first day that the pads came on, giving you a chance to kind of evaluate the trenches for the first time. I have to ask the question that's on everybody's mind. How did Joe Alt do in his one-on-ones against the Chargers elite pass rushers?
Yeah, so wrote it for today's practice report, which I assume will be out by the time this podcast is up. So I'll go into some detail here. Pull out the handy dandy notebook. So first 2 reps of the period were actually Joe Alt against Joey Bosa, which I found to be very interesting because back in the spring, if you recall, Joey said, like, we'll see how he does when I put my helmet into his chest.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what happened. He was joking to a degree, but I think, like, there was some truth to it. Like, you get out there in pads for the first time and you want to see what the young rookie is made of. And he came at him with power bull rush right away, which is not typically Joey's game, right? Joey's more of a technician, hand usage, but he came right at him. He pulled one out of Khalil Mack's bag, which was just hand, helmet to the chest and see what he had. And to his credit, like Joel, competed, like Joey won the rep. And was able to get some significant push because he came right at him and used all of his power. But, Alt was able to recover to a degree. Like, I think that's one thing that excited the Chargers a lot about Alt coming out is that, where there was some anchor issues, early in a rep, like he has the athleticism and body control to recover. And you did see a little bit of that there. And then the encouraging rep was the next one. Joey kind of set up his second move, which was he's kind of feinted the power and then went inside. And Alt showed off what I thought were some nice movement skills and was able to move with Joey to the inside and sort of prevent a clean win. Now, like, both of them probably give the nod to Joey Bosa. But like, you definitely saw some stuff there from Joe Alt. We were like, all right, he's going to be able to compete at this level and into 11-on-11 period as well. Like, I think there were some moments, like he gave up a sack to Joey Bosa in the red zone. Khalil Mack beat him for a pressure, but there were also some really encouraging reps where he stood up Joey Bosa on one rep. I thought he had a really nice rep against Bud Dupree in pass protection. So there's definitely something there. I mean, he's a top 5 pick, so you'd expect him to go out there and compete. But I think the one encouraging thing is, like, if you're going to get tested at this time of year, there's no better place to do it than on the field with the Chargers and this group of pass rushers.
Yeah, you're going to get ready. And I mean, there's a ton of guys with a lot of different skill sets that are going to throw at you. And, he's going to have to be ready because the first test is going to be a big one against Max Crosby at week 1 against the Raiders. So obviously Joe Alt's performance is very important. But another big question, that I have on the offensive line is how Trey Pipkins was looking on his transition to the inside. How did Pipkins fare so far with his first opportunity playing guard with the pads on?
Yeah, so it's a little tough because Rashawn isn't really practicing right now.
Right.
He's dealing with a minor injury, and he was back in pads today. He did the one-on-one period and had 2 really physical reps against Khalil Mack. Looked fine physically, but he really was only in for one 11-on-11 period. So the other 4 periods, it was Alt and Pipkins at the 2 tackle spots, and they kind of rotated. Pipkins had 2 series at right, two periods at right, 2 periods at left. Alt had 2 periods at right, 2 periods at left. So hard to get a gauge today in 11-on-11 because it was a limited 1 period where Slater was actually in there and they had the full line. But I thought he looked really good in the 1-on-1 period. He matched up with Scott Matlock. It was actually funny. Harbaugh was at quarterback, and he did a hard count on one of the snaps and drew Scott Matlock offside before he was going up against Pipkins, which is
that's hilarious.
It's just classic Harbaugh stuff, Usually in past seasons, whenever I've watched a 1-on-1 period, it's the assistant O-line coach or Corey Lindsley used to do line up at quarterback in years past because he wouldn't do the 1-on-1 drills. But there was Harbaugh, hard counting in 1-on-1 periods. So that was before the second rep. The first rep, he looked really smooth there. I thought initial power was really good. He was able to get hands on Matlock. Scott Matlock, the way he plays, it's just, he's an effort player. He's that.
Yeah. Balls to the wall. Yeah.
Just a rugged interior guy. So he was able to get some push on second effort. But the second rep was really, really impressive, I thought, from Trey. I think it's going to be a work in progress. We'll see what happens over the coming days. This week, I think is going to be really important, especially if Rashawn Slater gets back in there and we get to see some more of Trey at guard to see, how that transition is really going. But what you have there is you have size, you have athleticism. The one thing that, is going to be really important about that transition is the speed of things, right? On the outside, when you're playing tackle, you get a few more milliseconds before that rusher is on you. At guard, it's instantaneous where boom, you're in a position where you have to anchor and you have to get your hands on defenders. So that transition in terms of the speed of how fast rushers come on you is going to be the big thing for Trey. And that's something that, I'll obviously be monitoring here this week and as the padded practices continue.
Yeah, no question. It's definitely going to be very important, with the state of the Chargers offensive line. But, today was a good chance to see the offensive line as a whole working together, not just against the pass, but running the football as well. The Chargers need their line and the running backs to kind of be the strength of this football team. How did the rushing attack look on day 1 of pads?
Yeah, the defense had the upper hand, which is to be expected, right? I mean, it's the first day that the offensive linemen, tight ends, running backs, everyone's in pads. There's going to be an acclimation period there. So I definitely saw the defense, come alive in that area, which is, completely understandable. This time of camp, regardless of whether it's new coach, new scheme, all of that stuff, the defense is going to be a little bit ahead. And so, but I did see some stuff from the defense that was actually encouraging. I thought Chris Rumph was really active in the run.
He looks bigger. He looks bigger this.
Yeah. So he didn't have a great 1-on-1 period. He matched up with Tyler McClellan, who actually got a shout out from Harbaugh in the press conference afterwards. And McClellan won both of those reps. But I think with Rumph, he's, obviously an experienced player, super productive in college. So I think he comes alive a little bit more in those 11-on-11 periods. But he had 1 run stuff. He had penetration off the edge on a Kamani Vidal run that led to a Troy Dye stuff. And I also saw some nice run defending from Bud Dupree as well. So yeah, I don't think I'm even going to write about the running game until probably much later this week, unless there's a big practice where they're able to get this thing going. Yeah. It's just going to take some time. And then even with now you have moving pieces on the offensive line, it's not an ideal scenario, but I think defense had the upper hand today, but we'll see what happens as the padding practices continue. And as this group, not just the offensive line, but the tight ends, running backs, everyone gets more time together.
Well, and also Greg Roman's rushing attacks are pretty diverse too. There's a lot of moving parts to that, specific, aspect of his offense, one of his bread and butter situations. So it might take a little bit longer for that to kind of manifest itself. But we're going to get back into this interview with Daniel Popper, talking about Quentin Johnston and how he's looking and if he is seeing a different player this year, and so much more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. But first, I got to tell you guys about FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as this playoff season winds down, we get fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like we want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up the bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Right now is the absolute best time to bet on baseball, and tonight is the battle of the Chargers fans as the Padres are taking on the Los Angeles Dodgers, and I'm calling for the upset. Not only do I like the Padres to cover the 1.5 point spread at -150, I think they'll pull off the win. So I'm taking them on the money line at +118. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. But Jim Harbaugh said last week, just because the pads come on doesn't mean that all the players are going to have to ratchet up the intensity to 10. We know that they're employing the glide theory. So how physical was it at Monday's practice?
Oh, it was physical. It was physical. I mean, Harbaugh had to stop. Let's look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 reps into the first 11 and 11 period. He stopped practice and brought everyone to the middle because there was a tempo violation on a rush. That was actually after a play that Joe Alt rep against Bud Dupree that I mentioned that I thought was impressive. That was right after that happened. There was some sort of tempo violation up front, he said. I think it was Joey bull rushing a little bit too hard. But, I really was impressed by the level of physicality in the one-on-one period. I mentioned those Khalil Mack, Rashawn Slater matchups. Like, that was full-fledged. Like, that was legit. Like, the collisions were loud.
Yeah.
And you definitely saw like a high level of competition there. And then, interestingly, there was a fully live play in the practice. Just going through my notes here. So they were doing this period called play the next. That's what Harbaugh calls it. So basically you start on third down. And then if you don't convert, you go to fourth down. If you convert on third or fourth down, then you get a fresh set. And then you play that set of downs. So the third team had come in. Casey Bauman, the rookie, was at quarterback. Isaiah Spiller was able to convert a 4th and 3 on a run, actually. That was probably the best run of the day for any of the units, first, second, or third team. And then they got a fresh set of downs, and eventually they got to a 3rd and 2. And Harbaugh announced, like, hey, we're going live, fully live here, including the quarterback. So they ended up handing off to Kamani Vidal. He bounced to the left and actually fought through a tackle from Zamari Walton for a first down, but then Harbaugh called a holding penalty on Brett Lang. So that was fully live. Like, if they had dropped back to pass or anything like that, like, it would have been fully live, like on the quarterback as well. But that's only for second and third team. So like the first team, wouldn't have gone live there. They would have gone to walkthrough. But basically he has a red zone period where if you get inside the 10, it becomes live for the second and third team. And then if the second and third team are going to be in any sort of short yardage situation, so in this instance, a 3rd and 2, they're potentially going to be going live in those situations as well. So like there's the glide theory, the ramp up and all of that, but there is like a little bit of that old school mentality. Like I've been covering the league for 10 years. It's the first time I've ever seen like a fully live play in a training camp practice, including the quarterback. That's like, that's old school, man. I love it though. And like in his mind, it's like, I asked him about it. He said, we got a preseason game coming up and these guys are going to be playing preseason football. So, like you gotta, with these guys that are going to be playing significant snaps in those games, you got to be doing this to get them ready, which I found interesting.
I like it though, because I mean, honestly, like real football, they're not going to just play at thud tempo. Like every a couple reps. You got to get in there and actually do it from start to finish and kind of get your body used to the hits. So the first time that you're getting hit is not in the preseason game, which, we know that could cause some injuries. But, we had you on the show earlier in the offseason where you were hesitant to kind of jump on the Quentin Johnston bandwagon because of how far you thought he would have to come from a route running perspective, amongst other things. What have, kind of been your assessment so far of QJ early on in training camp?
Yeah, I see a better player. Like taking everything into account. Now, pads came on today. Like now is really when you can start evaluating. Yeah. But I do see like a better player. I see a more confident player. I think he's a better route runner. I've seen him create more separation. I think even with today's drop, that the hands are better, are more consistent. Like I do see improvement. Now, none of that matters if you can't make that play today. And I know like it ended up on Twitter or whatever. I mean, that's the play from like that we saw a number of times last year where, great, great release off the ball, athleticism and speed down the sideline.
Has separation.
Great separation, has the size to get up and rise above Christian Fulton. Herbert delivers maybe his best throw of the entire camp so far, and it's just off his hands. Now, what I will say is I loved his reaction to it, because I think like last year when he would make drops like that in training camp, you didn't really see, a reaction, but he stood up and was just, screaming, so angry at himself, just, but you love to see that from a player that needs to improve. Now, like in a perfect world for the Chargers, he's making that play.
Yeah.
But, the fact that he reacted in that way and then was out in the jugs machine for 15 minutes after practice, like that's the stuff that you want to see from a guy that is in that situation, where he knows he has to improve. He's articulated it, and now he's showing it as well in terms of how he's reacting to this. So I think overall, like I have seen some promising parts of his training camp, but none of that matters if he's not going to make, those type of plays. Like that's the guy that he has to be. He's got to be able to haul those in.
Yeah, I appreciate the fact that he's putting in the extra work after practice, trying to improve upon that, doing the jugs machine, doing the over the shoulder stuff. Like that's definitely important. That's what you want to see from, a guy that got really a lot of slack for, the drops last year, even though it was only a couple. They were just in some really, really big moments. But, one of the players we were kind of really most excited to see this season is Daiyan Henley, who is trying to win the starting linebacker spot and kind of show his full skill set when the pads come on. Do you feel like he can be an impact player on this defense if he's able to win the spot?
Yeah, I thought he was one of my standout players of the spring, to be honest. I just thought you saw like his coverage skills, which were part of what made him an attractive prospect coming out of college. But yeah, I just thought like his awareness, he was really sticky on a lot of wheel routes. He was making plays in the ball down the field, which is super encouraging because what he does bring is like the violence and the athleticism, the sideline to sideline tackling. Like that feels like it's going to be a consistent part of his game. But to see him like make plays in coverage and look comfortable, operating down the field on running backs, I thought was really encouraging. So yeah, right now, like he's the guy. Like it's him and Denzel Perryman. That's pretty much squared away at this point. Junior Colson had the injury during the spring. I thought if he could get on the field in training camp because of his knowledge of the scheme and having been with Jesse Minter last year, that maybe he could be, a factor in that competition. But then he had the appendectomy and now he's out for the first 5 days. It feels like the odds are stacked against him now as a rookie trying to, be an impact role player like early on in the season, maybe later in the season. So, Daiyan's a starter right now next to Denzel Perryman. I'm excited to watch him, when the pads come on, specifically like those running back, linebacker, one-on-one pass protection drills. I love those drills because you can really see like which running backs are about it, in pass protection. And you can also see what kind of juice some of these linebackers have as pass rushers. So I'll be monitoring that. But yeah, really good spring. No splash plays that I've seen early on in training camp, but he's really carved out a role as like as what appears to be right now like a starting linebacker for the Chargers in 2024.
We're going to get back into this interview with Daniel Popper, talking about the defense and who's standing out and if he has ever covered a coach like Jim Harbaugh before, and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. But first, I got to tell you guys about GameTime. GameTime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. You can get zone deals where you save even more when you choose a section and let GameTime choose the seats. They have all-in pricing, which toggling this feature shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. One of my favorite things about GameTime is you get your panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Now download the GameTime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Yeah, I was going to ask you about Junior Colson and kind of how that impacted, but you kind of answered it right there in that question. And I mean, it makes sense. Obviously, you know, he's in a very rare position where he's able to play in the same exact defense that he played in when he was in college and excelled in that defense, and kind of pretty much brought the entire coaching staff there with him. But, you know, the defensive line, you know, has had a lot of question marks for, you know, going into this season, because there's almost no proven talent outside of, you know, Morgan Fox and Poona Ford. How closely will you be monitoring this group when the pads come on to see if, you know, you can come up with some of the answers to some of those big questions in that position group?
Yeah, I think it's kind of wide open. You know, Scott Matlock has really made inroads with this new coaching staff from what I've seen. Like, he is a big part of the first team rotation. You know, I'd probably say it's, you know, Poona, Morgan, and Matlock sort of at the top of that interior defensive line room. And then everyone else, you know, Tito, Justin Aboigbe, all those guys, Chris Hinton, kind of fighting it out, you know, behind those three guys. But yeah, like we talked about earlier, like, you know, you need some reps, you need some days and pads before you can really start to evaluate the running game. I think similarly, like, you know, defense had a good day today, in my opinion, but you need to stack some days before you can see sort of what they have, you know, on the interior in terms of the defensive line. I think the interesting part of it is, like, like you said, it's a lot of young guys with a lot to prove, you know, like, this is a huge opportunity for some of these young guys to really play like meaningful, legitimate snaps for the first time in their career. Now, on one side, that could be like you know, they're lacking experience, like it's a question mark. On the other hand, like, you're going to get a ton of really motivated players on the interior. Like, it's going to be a very different group than this team has had in years past, where it was, you know, more proven veteran guys, you know? And so it's going to be really fascinating to watch who makes the splash plays, what's the rotation look like, and then, you know, lower down on the depth chart, like, who are the guys that are flashing, that are going to sort of establish themselves and really build out potentially big roles on the interior this year.
Well, Daniel, you've been covering the Chargers for a couple of years now, and so I just wanted to get your opinion on just a general vibes, you know, just difference between Brandon Staley and his training camp, and now Jim Harbaugh and what his training camp's been like. How kind of different has it been?
Yeah, there's some similarities and some differences, you know. I think, like, my feeling more than anything is just like, you have this brand new facility, like, the grass fields are immaculate. Like, it feels like an NFL training camp, you know? And then on top of that, you have this super established head coach with a national championship and a Super Bowl appearance. And all of that just, you know, creates a vibe of, like, this is the real deal, you know? Like, this is what the NFL is supposed to look like. And I think you're hearing it and seeing it from the players. You know, I think Joey said it the other day that, you know, there's no guesswork involved, you know, with Harbaugh's plan. Like, when he goes up and talks in front of the team, he lays out his vision for how it's going to work. He's not testing anything out, as Joey put it. Like, this is proven, you know? And so I think you see that in the energy on the field. Like, there is a belief that, like, okay, this guy knows exactly what he's doing. And if we just do what he says, we're going to win football games, you know? So I think all of that together, you have the coach, you have the new facility, it all feels very real. It feels like, you know, you're at the pinnacle of the sport. And I think there's a belief permeating around the players that, you know, there's a guy here that knows exactly what he's doing, and they believe in him.
Well, Daniel, we'll get you out of here on this one. You had a pretty funny kind of back and forth with Jim Harbaugh about Rashawn Slater's potential injury, and he was giving absolutely nothing except for that he was working through something. Harbaugh is definitely a unique character. Have you ever covered a coach like the Chargers' new head man in charge?
No, he is a singular human being. Like today, I asked about Alohi Gilman not being at practice, and he just takes a breath and he goes, "The team got bigger and stronger." And then there was just silence, and we're all just like, "What is he talking about?" And he's like, "Yeah, Alohi had a baby," and we're all like, "Oh, that's what you mean." It was like it's different, I would say. But yeah, I mean, like, it's just kind of like standard procedure for a reporter and a head coach. Like,
Sure.
my job is to ask questions, get information, and his job is to answer those however he sees fit. And, when the starting left tackle walks off the field with trainers and doesn't come back to practice, and then the GM and the head coach go over and talk to the head athletic trainer, and they're all talking about something, and Marco Zucconi, the head athletic trainer, is flexing his leg, and they have a 15-minute conversation. To me, that's a little bit different than, Josh Palmer walking off to the weight room by himself and going to meet Ben Herbert. Like, those to me are two different things. And, my job is to get information, and I'm going to continue to ask questions, and, we'll see what happens. That's just basically what it is. I think sometimes, like, these interactions get blown out of proportion a little bit, and people are trying to, like, interpret, motivations and whatever. It's just like, I'm a reporter. My job is to ask questions and glean as much information as I can so that I can communicate it to the fan base. And that's what I'm trying to do.
And we appreciate you very much for doing that. Daniel Popper, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Locked On Chargers podcast. Make sure you go follow Daniel on X at Daniel R. Popper and follow all of his work at The Athletic. He covers the Chargers in depth every single practice. He has the best written work on the Chargers in the business. Do it right now. Go subscribe. Daniel Popper, thank you so much, brother.
Thanks for having me, David.
Daniel Popper of The Athletic was absolutely phenomenal. Really, truly appreciate Daniel for jumping on and talking to us about what happened in the first padded practice. Really excited about Joe Alt and where this defensive line is going to go and who is going to emerge, because those two position groups are vitally important to the success of the Chargers this season. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. Please come back and make sure you check out the show tomorrow, because I am going to have ESPN's Chris Rim on the show. So make sure you never miss it. Go check us out on our Locked On Chargers YouTube channel. And of course, anywhere you get your podcasts on audio platform, we are there. Go follow us on Facebook at Locked On Chargers. Go follow our Instagram page at Locked On Chargers. And of course, on X at Locked On LAC. You can find me on Twitter at Dro Talk Sports. And you can find my partner who is on paternity leave, Daniel Wade, at Dan Talk Sports. But that's going to wrap things up for today's episode. Thanks so much for joining me. We will see you tomorrow. Go Bolts.